At 01:30 on January 30, 1944, 767 Rangers from the 1st and 3rd Battalions left their starting point and moved into the dark toward Cisterna, Italy. They walked in single file along the Mussolini Canal drainage ditch. Total silence. No lights, no talking. Only the sounds of boots in mud and gears shifting on straps. The air was almost freezing. Rangers used their compasses to navigate in complete darkness. 3 miles ahead, the small town of Cisterna controlled important road junctions needed for any Allied advance from the Anzio beachhead. Intelligence reports said German defenses near Cisterna were weak, just scattered outposts, light resistance. The Rangers planned to sneak past German lines, take Cisterna before dawn, and hold it until the 3rd Infantry Division could join them. But the intelligence was wrong. German forces had chosen Cisterna as a meeting point for counterattack troops. The Hermann Göring Panzer Division had placed 17 Panzer IV tanks and hidden positions around the town. The 715th Infantry Division held the land between the Allies and Cisterna. Field Marshal Albert Kessler had ordered all available units to Anzio to stop the Allied beachhead. German commanders knew the Rangers were coming. They moved 2 full divisions, plus tanks, to fight off the expected attack. This was not the lightly held outpost American intelligence had believed. It was a trap, and the Rangers were walking right into it. The fact that German forces had set up 2 full divisions and tanks to fight fewer than 800 men showed something important. The Germans feared the Rangers, and for good reason. The problem for Allied forces in Italy in 1943 was simple. German defenses were very strong. German troops were dug into mountains, hills, and fortified towns all over Italy. Every advance cost hundreds of Allied lives. Every strong point needed days of artillery bombardment and frontal attacks that wore out divisions. The Gustav Line south of Rome had stopped the entire Fifth Army. Monte Cassino had become a killing ground where Allied divisions threw themselves at German positions and thousands died. American and British commanders needed something different. They needed troops who could go around German defenses, attack from surprising directions, move at night, sneak behind enemy lines, and finish missions normal infantry could not. They needed raiders, commandos, special assault forces who could do what regular divisions could not. The British had commandos, highly trained raiders who had attacked along occupied coasts since 1940. They used small unit tactics, night attacks, and amphibious assaults to strike hard and fast. The commandos had shown that small elite troops could do big missions that whole divisions could not do in normal ways. But in 1942, the United States Army had no force like that. American infantry divisions were trained for normal battles, set-piece fights, and frontal attacks with artillery support. They were good at that, but they were not trained for raids, sneaking behind enemy lines, or commando missions. General George Marshall, the Army Chief of Staff, saw this problem. In May 1942, he approved creating a new unit, the 1st Ranger Battalion, named after Rogers Rangers from the French and Indian War. This new unit would be modeled on British commandos, but it would be American, with American leaders and soldiers. The mission was clear: build an elite fighting force that could do what normal infantry could not do. Brigadier General Lucien Truscott, the Army's contact to the British Combined Operations Headquarters, sent a message to Major General Russell Hartley, who led American forces in Northern Ireland. The message allowed the 1st Ranger Battalion to start immediately. 2,000 men volunteered from the 34th Infantry Division and the 1st Armored Division in Northern Ireland. The men came from all over America: farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Pennsylvania, college students from California. They wanted action, challenge, and something more than normal infantry work. Posters asked for volunteers for hazardous duty. No details, no promises, just dangerous work. Men still lined up to join. Out of 2,000 volunteers, only 600 were chosen. The selection was very hard. Fitness tests cut half the men immediately. Interviews tested their motivation and character.
Background checks removed anyone with discipline problems. The Army wanted the best, and only the best passed. The man chosen to lead this unit was Captain William Orlando Darby, 31 years old, West Point graduate, class of 1933. He was an artillery officer with no special operations experience, but he had something else: leadership, presence, and the ability to inspire men to do things they thought they could not. Within weeks, Darby was promoted to major for organizing the battalion. The men who passed selection arrived at Carrickfergus, Northern Ireland on June 19, 1942. Company A, 1st Ranger Battalion, was officially activated. They had uniforms, rifles, and basic infantry training, but they did not yet know how to be Rangers. That training would come in Scotland. In late June, Darby led the 600 volunteers to the Commando Training Centre at Achnacarry Castle in the Scottish Highlands. The journey began with a train to Fort William, then a 7-mile forced march with full packs to the camp. Some men dropped out on the march. Some collapsed from exhaustion. Some quit. By the time they reached Achnacarry, 90 men were gone. 510 remained. The Commando Training Centre was run by Lieutenant Colonel Charles Vaughan, a British officer who had led many commando raids and knew what combat really needed. Vaughan's instructors were battle-hardened commando veterans who had fought in Norway, France, and North Africa. They had killed Germans. They had been shot at. They knew what worked and what got men killed. The training was unlike anything American soldiers had done before. Physical training made regular basic training look easy. Forced marches through Scottish mountains with 80-pound packs. Obstacle courses run at full speed. Rope climbs, cliff climbs, hand-to-hand fighting, all done in the cold, rain, and mud of the Scottish Highlands. But the physical training was only the start. The real training was in tactics. Moving at night, staying silent in darkness, navigating by compass and stars, sneaking up on enemy positions without being seen, learning to quietly kill sentries with knives or garrots, working in small units, moving as a fire team, a squad, or a platoon without radios, using hand signals, trusting the man next to you to do his job while you did yours. They practiced amphibious operations, getting into small boats in rough seas, landing on hostile beaches under fire, and moving from water to target without breaking formation. Weapons training covered everything Rangers might use: British and American rifles, machine guns, mortars, grenades, and even German weapons, because in combat you used what worked, and ammo came from wherever you found it. They learned street fighting, clearing houses room by room, breaching doors, throwing grenades into enclosed spaces, and clearing buildings without getting killed. They practiced demolitions, blowing bridges, destroying bunkers, disabling artillery, and sabotaging supply dumps. Training used live ammo, real bullets flying over crawling Rangers, and real explosives detonating near moving groups. The British believed training must copy combat as closely as possible. If men could work under live fire in training, they could do it in battle. One Ranger was killed in training. Several were wounded. But the 500 who finished the course at Achnacarry in September 1942 were as well trained as any infantry in the world. The first test in combat came on August 19, 1942, before the full battalion finished training. 50 Rangers under Captain Roy Murray joined British and Canadian forces for Operation Jubilee, the raid on Dieppe, France. The goal was to test German coastal defenses, gather intelligence, and show that Allies could do amphibious raids. The raid was a disaster. Germans were ready before the attack started. Landing craft faced heavy fire from coastal guns and machine guns. Canadian infantry were cut down on the beaches. Tanks got stuck in shingle and were destroyed by German anti-tank guns. Of the 6,000 Allied troops who landed, over 3,000 were killed or captured. But the Rangers attached to No. 4 Commandos completed their mission successfully. 4 Rangers joined British commandos to attack the Hesse Battery at Zinwil. It had 6 German 155mm guns in strong positions. The commandos and Rangers snuck through woods, came from an unexpected direction, and destroyed the battery in close combat. It was the only Allied success at Dieppe. Lieutenant Colonel Edward Lustello, 23, from Franklin, Louisiana, led 7 Rangers with No. 3 Commando at Berneval when German patrol boats attacked their landing craft. 3 boats made it to shore under heavy fire. Lustello took command when the British captain was killed. He led his Rangers and remaining commandos up steep cliffs under machine gun and mortar fire. Lustello was wounded 3 times. On the 3rd wound, while trying to take out a German gun, he was killed. Lustello became the first American soldier to die in ground combat in Europe in World War II. His death and the deaths of Lieutenant Joseph Randall and Technician 4th Grade Howard Henry showed something important. Rangers would fight. They would not quit. They would not run. They would attack until killed. German defenders at Dieppe wrote about this in their after-action.
The Rangers had a very important mission: capture the coastal batteries at Arzew, Algeria, before they could fire on the invasion fleet. 2 batteries, Batterie du Nord and Batterie du Sud, were manned by French colonial troops loyal to Vichy France. The Rangers would land at night, sneak inland, and attack both batteries at the same time from behind before dawn. At 0 hours on November 8, 1942, 2 Ranger companies landed on beaches east of Arzew in total darkness. They moved inland using compasses. No lights, no noise, total silence. Company Able went north to Batterie du Nord. Company Baker went south to Batterie du Sud. Both companies reached their targets without being seen. At 03:30, both companies attacked at the same time. The French defenders were completely surprised. Rangers climbed over walls with grenades and rifles, fought hand-to-hand in bunkers, and secured both batteries in 20 minutes. 40 French soldiers were captured, no Rangers were killed. The invasion fleet landed without any problems at Arzew. General Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, wrote about the Rangers' success in his reports. The 1st Ranger Battalion finished its mission with skill and aggression beyond expectations. The next mission made German forces notice them. In February 1943, the 1st Rangers carried out the first American behind-the-lines raid of the war at Sened Station, Tunisia. German and Italian forces held a strong outpost in the mountains. Allied intelligence needed information about enemy positions, defenses, and numbers. Enemy strength and positions were strong. A frontal attack would have caused hundreds of casualties. Darby planned a night raid. 3 Ranger companies would march 12 miles through enemy land at night, approach Sened Station from the rear, attack at dawn, capture prisoners, destroy the position, and leave before German reinforcements arrived. On the night of February 10th to 11th, 200 Rangers moved out from Allied lines. They moved through darkness over rough land, avoiding Italian outposts, and stayed completely silent. At dawn on February 11th, the Rangers attacked Sened Station from 3 directions at the same time. The Italian garrison was completely surprised. Rangers cleared the position using grenades, rifles, and hand-to-hand fighting. 11 Italians were killed and 11 captured, including 1 officer who gave useful intelligence. The Rangers destroyed supply dumps, damaged equipment, and withdrew before German forces could react. Only 1 Ranger was wounded. The raid showed everything that made Rangers effective: night sneaking, surprise, aggression, precise planning, and fast withdrawal. Regular infantry would have needed artillery, air support, and a frontal attack, which would have warned every German unit. Rangers did it silently and quickly, showing the enemy no time to react. The operation that proved Rangers' reputation beyond doubt happened in March 1943 at El Ghoutar, Tunisia. American forces under General Patton were stopped by German defenses in the mountains. The key position was Jebel Elk, a fortified hill guarding the way to El Ghoutar. 2 American infantry battalions had attacked and been destroyed. German machine guns in concrete bunkers covered all paths. Artillery fire from hidden positions killed anything moving in daylight. The hill seemed impossible to take with a frontal attack. Patton gave the mission to the Rangers. Darby studied the area and planned a night march. The Rangers would move 12 miles around the German flank through unmapped mountains at night, climb the back of Jebel Elk in darkness, and attack at dawn from the direction Germans did not expect. On the night of March 20th, the whole 1st Ranger Battalion moved out. They used compasses to navigate the mountains with no trails.
They climbed rocky slopes with full combat gear. They were so quiet that Germans less than 100 meters away heard nothing. At dawn on February 21st, the Rangers attacked Jebel Elk from 3 directions at the same time. The Italian garrison was completely surprised. Rangers cleared the position using grenades, rifles, and hand-to-hand fighting. 200 Germans were captured with very few Ranger casualties. Patton now had his breakthrough. American tanks poured through the gap the Rangers had made. The Battle of El Guetar became the first big American victory against German forces in World War II, and it was the Rangers who made it happen. German reports from Tunisia said the 1st Ranger Battalion was a serious threat. Small units, lightly armed but very well trained and led, able to sneak at night past German defenses, willing to fight Germans hand-to-hand and never retreat. German commanders started planning defenses assuming Rangers could appear anywhere from any direction at any time. The success of the 1st Ranger Battalion led to quick growth. In April 1943, Darby was told to create 2 more battalions. The 3rd and 4th Ranger Battalions were started in North Africa using volunteers from 7th Army units with combat experience. Darby provided the leaders. Officers and NCOs from the 1st Battalion trained the new units. In 3 weeks, Darby trained the 2 new Ranger battalions to the same standard as the 1st. The invasion of Sicily in July 1943 had all 3 Ranger battalions in action. The 1st and 4th Rangers landed at Gela before the 1st Infantry Division. Their mission was to take the port and stop Italian coastal defenses before the main force landed. In the dark on July 10, 1943, Rangers landed on enemy beaches under fire from Italian pillboxes. They attacked directly from the landing craft with rifles and grenades. Italian defenders fired from concrete bunkers, but Rangers got close faster than they could react. Within 4 hours, Gela was in Ranger hands. But German forces responded fast. The Hermann Göring Panzer Division counterattacked with Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks. 46 medium tanks moved toward the beach to push the invasion back. The Rangers had no heavy anti-tank weapons, only bazookas and grenades. Naval guns from destroyers offshore helped, but German tanks kept coming. Darby set up a defensive line using every weapon. Rangers fired bazookas at point-blank range. Naval fire, directed by Ranger observers, destroyed tanks as they got close. Hand-to-hand fighting happened in the streets. German infantry and Rangers fought house to house. The battle lasted 2 days. German tanks got within 300 meters of the beach before Ranger bazookas and naval guns stopped them. When the Hermann Göring Division finally pulled back, 17 German tanks were destroyed in and around Gela. The Rangers had held. They had stopped a Panzer Division using rifles, grenades, and naval support. That defense at Gela made Germans respect Rangers' abilities. In September 1943, Rangers landed at Salerno, Italy before the main invasion. Their mission was to take and hold Chunzi Pass, the key ground controlling the roads inland from the beachhead. German forces were expected to counterattack through the pass to push Allied troops back into the sea. The Rangers had to hold the pass until the main force could reach them. At 0330 hours on September 9, 1943, Rangers landed at Miori and moved inland right away. They got to Chunzi Pass before the Germans realized the invasion had started. Rangers dug into defensive positions on high ground overlooking the pass. When German counterattacks came, the Rangers were ready. For 13 days, Rangers held Chunzi Pass against constant German attacks, artillery fire, infantry assaults, and night probes. The Germans threw everything they had at the Rangers trying to break through. Rangers' positions were under non-stop fire. Casualties grew every day. Ammo ran low and food and water were rationed, but the Rangers did not give up. Not 1 meter. German reports said American Rangers at Chunzi Pass fought harder than normal infantry. Positions that should have fallen stayed under attack. Counterattacks from defensive positions were aggressive. Wounded Rangers kept fighting. The pass held until the 5th Army broke through from Salerno and relieved the Rangers on September 22nd. By then, Darby's Ranger force at Chunzi had grown from a battalion to a brigade as other units joined the Rangers. During the fighting, Darby commanded about 8,500 men, but the Corps Rangers who held the key ground were fewer than 2,000. and they did what whole divisions sometimes could not do. They held ground against huge German attacks and refused to retreat. That reputation as troops who never ran, fought harder than normal infantry, and completed missions others could not was why Germans feared Rangers. But the mission that truly made German forces respect Rangers was the disaster at Saturna. In January 1944, Allied forces landed at Anzio on the Italian coast, north of the Gustav Line. The goal was to bypass German defenses, land behind enemy lines, and move inland to cut German supply routes. The landing worked. 36,000 troops came ashore with little resistance. But the Allied commander, Major General Lucas, hesitated. Instead of moving inland immediately, Lucas strengthened the beachhead. German forces responded fast. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring sent every available unit to Anzio. Within days, 8 German divisions moved around the Allied beachhead. The Hermann Göring Panzer Division, the 3rd Panzergrenadier Division, the 4th Infantry Division, and the 4th Parachute Division, elite German troops. Kesselring wanted to contain the beachhead and then counterattack to push the invasion force back into the sea. Lucas needed a breakthrough. He had to expand the beachhead before the Germans could surround them. The target was Saturna, a small town controlling road junctions needed for any advance. The mission went to the Rangers. The 1st and 3rd Ranger battalions would sneak through German lines at night, moving 5 miles behind enemy lines along drainage ditches. They would take Saturna in a surprise attack
before dawn and hold it until the 3rd Infantry Division could link up with them. The 4th Ranger Battalion would attack along the road to clear the main approach. Intelligence said German defenses in front of Cisterna were thin, just scattered outposts and light resistance. The main German line was thought to be behind the town. But the intelligence was wrong. German forces had made Cisterna an assembly area for counterattack units. The Hermann Göring Panzer Division had placed tanks and infantry around the town. The 715 Infantry Division held the ground between Allied lines and Cisterna. Instead of lightly held outposts, the Rangers would be moving into the main German defensive concentration. At 0130 hours on January 30th, 1944, the 1st and 3rd Ranger Battalions crossed the line of departure and moved into no man's land. 767 Rangers in single file along the Mussolini Canal drainage ditch. They moved in complete darkness, no lights, no noise, total tactical silence. They passed meters from German positions without being seen. For the first 3 miles, the infiltration went perfectly. Rangers bypassed sentries, crossed obstacles, and kept formation without talking. But at 0600 hours, as dawn came, the ditch ended. The Rangers were still 800 meters from Cisterna. Open, flat fields lay between them and the town, with no cover. Daylight was coming. The Rangers had 2 choices: stay in the ditch and lose surprise when the Germans found them, or cross the open ground in twilight and try to reach Cisterna before the Germans could react. They chose to cross. The German sentries saw them immediately. Alarms sounded, machine guns fired, and the Rangers were now in the middle of a huge German defensive position. The Hermann Göring Panzer Division had 17 Panzer IV tanks hidden in Cisterna. The 715 Infantry Division had troops on 3 sides of the Rangers. Instead of moving behind enemy lines, the Rangers had walked into the largest German force in the Anzio sector. The battle that followed lasted 8 hours. Rangers fought from drainage ditches, farmhouses, shell craters, or any cover they could find. German tanks tried to cut off escape routes. German infantry closed in from all sides. German artillery began hitting Ranger positions. The 4th Ranger Battalion tried to break through to rescue the trapped units, but German positions stopped them. Tanks, machine guns, and minefields blocked the relief. The 4th Rangers could not break through. The 3rd Infantry Division attacked, but could not reach Cisterna. German defenses held every attack. By afternoon, the Rangers were out of ammo. Bazookas empty, grenades gone, rifles down to the last rounds. The 1st and 3rd Battalions were surrounded with no help or way to escape. Major Alva Miller, commander of the 3rd Battalion, was killed leading a counterattack. Major John Dobson, commander of the 1st Battalion, was badly wounded. German forces called for surrender, but the Rangers refused. They fought with bayonets and rifle butts, hand-to-hand combat in ditches. Germans brought tanks forward and fired point-blank into Ranger positions. By late afternoon on January 30th, organized resistance ended. Of 767 Rangers who started the mission, only 6 made it back to Allied lines. 12 were killed, 36 wounded, and 743 captured. The 4th Ranger Battalion lost 30 killed and 58 wounded trying to reach the trapped units. Darby's Ranger force was basically destroyed. The 1st, 3rd, and 4th Battalions were disbanded. Surviving Rangers were sent to other units or back home to train new troops. But German reports noticed something important. Even when surrounded, outnumbered, out of ammo, and facing tanks up close, the Rangers kept fighting. They didn't surrender until they physically could not continue. Individual Rangers fought to the death rather than give up. Small groups counterattacked against impossible odds. Even after officers were killed and units split into small pockets, Rangers kept fighting. German intelligence said American Rangers showed motivation and determination beyond normal Wehrmacht infantry, close to Waffen-SS levels. That recognition from an enemy that respected combat skill showed what Rangers had become, an elite force that fought harder, took bigger risks, and completed missions regular forces could not, but at great cost. Cesternna was the worst Ranger defeat of World War II. But it was not the end of Rangers. The 2nd and 5th Ranger Battalions were formed in 1943 in the U.S. and trained at Camp Forrest, Tennessee, under Lieutenant Colonel James Earl Rudder. Rudder, 33, a former high school football coach from Texas, had no commando experience when he took command of the 2nd Rangers, but like Darby, he had leadership and had studied everything the 1st Rangers learned in combat. The 2nd and 5th Rangers arrived in England in January 1944. They trained with British commandos at Achnacarry, just like the 1st Rangers. They did live fire exercises, cliff climbing, night operations, and small boat handling. The mission they trained for was unlike anything Rangers had done before. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, Rangers would assault Pointe du Hoc, a 100-foot cliff on the Normandy coast. German intelligence reported 6 155mm guns in concrete positions at the top. These guns could fire on both Utah and Omaha beaches. They could destroy landing craft, kill troops on the beaches, and disrupt the whole invasion. The guns had to be destroyed before the main landing force came ashore, and the only way to reach them was to climb the cliff under fire. The 2nd Ranger Battalion trained for 3 months on cliffs along the English coast. They practiced every climbing method: rope ladders, rocket-fired grappling hooks, fire ladders from the London Fire Brigade. They trained until they could climb a 100-foot cliff in under 5 minutes. But training could not copy what they would face at Pointe du Hoc. German defenders on top threw grenades down, machine guns fired from the sides, mortars from inland. The climb would happen in daylight, under full observation, with no cover. At 04:45 hours on June 6, 1944, 225 Rangers from Companies D, E, and F loaded into British landing craft and headed to Pointe du Hoc. The naval bombardment had been hitting the cliff for an hour. Battleship cells and destroyer fire hit, but German defenses were still there. The landing craft moved toward the cliff under heavy fire. German machine guns swept the boats. Mortar rounds landed in the water around them. Rangers returned fire with Browning automatic rifles as they closed on the beach. At 07:10 hours, the landing craft hit the narrow beach at the base of the cliff. Rangers jumped into waist-deep water and ran for the cliff. German grenades fell from above, rifle fire from the cliff edge. Rangers fired rocket grapples. Ropes went up the cliff. Some caught, some fell. Germans cut ropes as they were fired. Rangers climbed hand over hand, 100-foot climb with full gear. Men fell when ropes were cut. Others kept going. German defenders threw grenades over the edge. Rangers on the cliff could not hide. They climbed faster. Some reached the top in under 3 minutes. The first Rangers over the cliff opened fire with automatic rifles, killing German defenders and pushing others back. More Rangers reached the top. 30 minutes after landing, 90 Rangers had climbed the cliff and were fighting German positions on the plateau. But when Rangers reached the gun positions, they were empty. The huge concrete casements only had telephone poles painted to look like gun barrels from the air. Allied intelligence had been tricked. The real guns had been moved inland days before the invasion. Ranger patrols moved inland looking for the guns. Sergeant Leonard Lemmel and Sergeant Jack Kuhn led a patrol south along a hedgerow toward a dirt road 250 yards from the coastal highway. Lemmel found 5 of the 6 155mm guns in an orchard, camouflaged with netting, ready to fire on the beaches. German crews were not there. Lemmel moved quietly. He destroyed 2 guns by smashing their traversing and elevating parts with thermite grenades. He also disabled the sights and parts on the others. A second patrol, led by Staff Sergeant Frank Rapinski from Company E, found and disabled the 6th gun. All 6 of Hawk's guns were useless. The mission was complete. But the Rangers on Pointe du Hoc were now surrounded. German forces counterattacked from 3 directions. Artillery fire from inland hit Ranger positions. German infantry probed the perimeter at night. Casualties grew. Ammunition ran out. Food and water were gone. Communications equipment had been destroyed in the landing. No one knew if the Rangers were alive or dead. For 2 days, Rangers held Pointe du Hoc against continuous German attacks. They fought from shell craters and broken bunkers. Wounded Rangers stayed on the line. The defensive perimeter got smaller as German pressure grew. By June 8th, only 90 Rangers could still fight. Of the 225 who had climbed the cliff, 77 were dead, 152 wounded. The rest were exhausted, out of ammunition, and surrounded. But they held. When relief forces finally reached Pointe du Hoc on June 8th, the Rangers were still in defensive positions, still fighting, still refusing to give ground. The 2nd and 5th Ranger Battalions kept fighting across France through summer 1944. Hill 400 in the Hurtgen Forest. Rangers attacked a fortified German position on steep slopes in winter. Other American units had tried and failed. Rangers attacked at night, climbed the hill under fire, and took the summit in close combat. They held against German counterattack.
Rangers had better training than regular American infantry. They operated in small units with less support, but got results bigger than their numbers. German commanders learned to reinforce areas where Rangers were seen. A single Ranger battalion needed defenses normally used for an entire American division. Because Rangers did not fight like normal infantry, they attacked at night, infiltrated defensive lines, appeared from unexpected directions, and once engaged, they fought until the position was taken or every Ranger was dead or wounded. This pattern repeated throughout 1944 and 1945. Rangers led assaults. They took objectives that other units could not take. They paid for their success with casualty rates that would have destroyed normal infantry units, but they kept fighting. After the war, German officers were interviewed by American intelligence about enemy forces they had faced. Rangers were always mentioned as one of the most effective Allied Special Operations forces, comparable to British commandos and Soviet guards in fighting skill and motivation. Better trained than normal American infantry, more aggressive than most German infantry, willing to fight German forces hand to hand instead of relying on artillery or air support. German prisoners said the same thing. You knew when you were fighting Rangers because they kept coming. They did not stop, they did not retreat. You had to kill every Ranger or they would kill you. That reputation was built on battles like El Guitar and Pointe du Hoc, but also on hundreds of smaller missions where Rangers did what normal infantry could not do. Infiltration patrols that captured prisoners from positions other units could not reach. Night raids that destroyed supply dumps behind German lines. Attacks on fortified positions that cleared the way for main forces. Every mission showed the same pattern. Rangers completed missions at high cost, but they completed them. William Darby did not survive the war. On April 30, 1945, Darby was Assistant Division Commander of the 10th Mountain Division in northern Italy.
German forces were collapsing, but still fighting. Darby was outside a command post in Torbay when a German 88mm shell exploded 30 feet away. Shrapnel hit Darby in the heart. He died 2 minutes later. 2 days before Germany surrendered, George Patton said Darby was the bravest man he had ever known. Lucian Truscott, who approved the creation of Rangers in 1942, called Darby one of the finest soldiers in the U.S. Army. Darby was promoted posthumously to brigadier general. His name is on ranger schools, ranger facilities, and memorials across America. But in 1945, his death was just another casualty in the final days of the war. James Rutter survived. He commanded the 2nd Rangers through D-Day and into December 1944, when he took command of the 109th Infantry Regiment. Rutter stayed in the Army Reserve after the war and became president of Texas A&M University in 1959. He died in 1970. Every year on June 6th, surviving Rangers from Pointe du Hoc gathered at the cliff in Normandy. Fewer each year, as age and time took their toll. In 1984, President Ronald Reagan visited Pointe du Hoc for the 40th anniversary of D-Day. 62 Rangers who had climbed the cliff were there. Reagan spoke at the site. He called them the Boys of Pointe du Hoc, the men who took the cliffs, the champions who helped free a continent, the heroes who helped end a war. Those words showed what Rangers represented. Not just elite soldiers, not just special operations forces, but men who did what needed to be done no matter the cost, who took objectives others could not take, who fought when fighting seemed impossible, who climbed cliffs under fire because that was the mission. The Rangers of World War II were disbanded after the war ended. The Army decided special operations forces were not needed in peacetime. Ranger battalions were deactivated. Training centers were closed. Lessons learned were filed away. But the need for Rangers returned, in Korea and in Vietnam, in every war where regular forces needed elite light infantry to do missions that needed special training and strong motivation. The 75th Ranger Regiment, formed in 1974, carries the history of the World War II Ranger battalions. The scroll they wear comes from Darby's Rangers. The training they do follows the same principles from Anazikuri: physical conditioning, small unit tactics, night operations, live fire exercises. The expectation that Rangers will do missions others cannot do. The standard that Rangers do not retreat, they do not surrender, they complete the mission or die trying. The reason German forces feared Rangers more than other Allied units is simple. Germans feared Rangers because Rangers were different. Not better armed, not more numerous, not supported by better artillery or air support. Rangers were feared because they fought differently. They accepted risks regular infantry avoided. They attacked from directions no one expected. They operated at night when other forces stayed in defensive positions. They fought German forces hand-to-hand when others relied on artillery or air support. German prisoners said the same thing. You knew when you were fighting Rangers because they kept coming. They did not stop. They did not retreat. You had to kill every Ranger or they would kill you. That reputation was built on battles like El Guitar and Pointe du Hoc, but also on hundreds of smaller missions where Rangers did what normal infantry could not do. Infiltration patrols that captured prisoners from positions other units could not reach. Night raids that destroyed supply dumps behind German lines. Attacks on fortified positions that cleared the way for main forces. Every mission showed the same pattern. Rangers completed missions at high cost, but they completed them. William Darby did not survive the war. On April 30, 1945, Darby was Assistant Division Commander of the 10th Mountain Division in northern Italy. German forces were collapsing, but still fighting. Darby was outside a command post in Torbay when a German 88mm shell exploded 30 feet away. Shrapnel hit Darby in the heart. He died 2 minutes later. 2 days before Germany surrendered, George Patton said Darby was the bravest man he had ever known. Lucian Truscott, who approved the creation of Rangers in 1942, called Darby one of the finest soldiers in the U.S. Army. Darby was promoted posthumously to brigadier general. His name is on ranger schools, ranger facilities, and memorials across America. But in 1945, his death was just another casualty in the final days of the war. James Rutter survived. He commanded the 2nd Rangers through D-Day and into December 1944, when he took command of the 109th Infantry Regiment. Rutter stayed in the Army Reserve after the war and became president of Texas A&M University in 1959. He died in 1970. Every year on June 6th, surviving Rangers from Pointe du Hoc gathered at the cliff in Normandy. Fewer each year, as age and time took their toll. In 1984, President Ronald Reagan visited Pointe du Hoc for the 40th anniversary of D-Day. 62 Rangers who had climbed the cliff were there. Reagan spoke at the site. He called them the boys of Pointe du Hoc, the men who took the cliffs, the champions who helped free a continent, the heroes who helped end a war. Those words showed what Rangers represented. Not just elite soldiers, not just special operations forces, but men who did what needed to be done no matter the cost, who took objectives others could not take, who fought when fighting seemed impossible, who climbed cliffs under fire because that was the mission. The Rangers of World War II were disbanded after the war ended. The Army decided special operations forces were not needed in peacetime. Ranger battalions were deactivated. Training centers were closed. Lessons learned were filed away. But the need for Rangers returned, in Korea and in Vietnam, in every war where regular forces needed elite light infantry to do missions that needed special training and strong motivation. The 75th Ranger Regiment, formed in 1974, carries the history of the World War II Ranger battalions. The scroll they wear comes from Darby's Rangers. The training they do follows the same principles from Anazikuri: physical conditioning, small unit tactics, night operations, live fire exercises. The expectation that Rangers will do missions others cannot do. The standard that Rangers do not retreat, they do not surrender, they complete the mission or die trying. The reason German forces feared Rangers more than other Allied units is simple. Germans feared Rangers because Rangers were different. Not better armed, not more numerous, not supported by better artillery or air support. Rangers were feared because they fought differently. They accepted risks regular infantry avoided. They attacked from directions no one expected. They operated at night when other forces stayed in defensive positions. They fought German forces hand-to-hand when others relied on artillery or air support. German prisoners said the same thing. You knew when you were fighting Rangers because they kept coming. They did not stop. They did not retreat. You had to kill every Ranger or they would kill you. That reputation was built on battles like El Guitar and Pointe du Hoc, but also on hundreds of smaller missions where Rangers did what normal infantry could not do. Infiltration patrols that captured prisoners from positions other units could not reach. Night raids that destroyed supply dumps behind German lines. Attacks on fortified positions that cleared the way for main forces. Every mission showed the same pattern. Rangers completed missions at high. That is why German troops feared U.S. Army Rangers more than other Allied units. Not because Rangers were invincible, but because they were relentless, unpredictable, and willing to pay any price to complete the mission. If you found this story compelling, please take a moment to like this video. It helps share these important military histories with more people who respect the sacrifices of these soldiers. Subscribe to stay connected with more World War II stories. Each story deserves to be remembered. Each story teaches something about courage, leadership, and the cost of freedom. We would love to hear from you in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from, or if you have family or research connections to World War II. Our community includes veterans, military historians, and people from around the world who value these stories. Thank you for watching and helping keep these histories alive.